All right. So I've heard a couple of, I guess you could say, rumors going around. I don't really think they're rumors. I think just fans just speculating on stuff, wondering if this thing could happen, things like that. Um, and I had my thoughts on them. I think I kind of responded to these ideas on Twitter a little bit, but you can only elaborate so much on Twitter. But on here, I have more of a forum to kind of more thoroughly explain where I'm at on that. One was Kareem Hunt possibly being moved on from. I'm gonna explain why I don't think that's a good idea or a likely course of action for the Cleveland Browns. And the other one was with Baker Mayfield, a possible trade for Baker Mayfield that I just don't think makes very much sense for the team that would be receiving Baker Mayfield. And again, I got a thorough explanation of that too. So let's talk about Kareem Hunt first. The ideal is that the Browns have 5 running backs. They want to keep Jerome Ford. They want to keep Dearness Johnson. They want to keep Nick Chubb. They want to keep Demetric Felton, not Dearness Johnson. So they have 3 that they want to keep: Demetric Felton, Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, according to some people out there, right? And that leaves the 2 that could be moved on from, or the 2 that people are juxtaposing for whatever reason, is Kareem Hunt and Dearness Johnson, who just signed a deal. Now, it's not like a huge guarantee. It's only like $900,000 guarantee, but it's still a deal. And people are putting this together just because Kareem Hunt is old, I believe, $6 million on cap. And Dearness is is less than that. So you could possibly save some money in the cap. Now, you guys know how I am about the salary cap. I think making these kind of fantasy moves based on salary cap is probably one of the least gratifying things a fan could do. Because one, the salary cap is not something we actually know what the status of is as a fan, right? Like, we have no clue what the Browns salary situation is. And that's because of the way that the NFL structures it now. And with void years and things like that, the cap is even more of a mystery. So trying to make decisions or takes based off of the salary cap, I have found to be a fruitless and very limited thing to do, just because we don't know all the information. How many times have we done this, right? Where we're like, the Saints have to get rid of 5 players because they've been in cap hell forever. Or the same thing with the Rams, right? They got to get rid of somebody. They have not gotten rid of anybody. They've given players more money. They found a way to keep it together. And we're just sitting here every offseason ringing the panic bell for the Rams that this is going to go bad. And one day it might, right? The bubble's going to burst eventually. But from a day-to-day perspective, we do this. And then next season comes around and nothing happens. Now, again, this doesn't mean it's going to go on forever. Eventually, like, the bill does come due. But as long as the NFL keeps growing as a league, this is going to continue to go on, and the NFL is not going to stop growing, I don't think, anytime soon. This is probably a problem for like maybe in 10 years that the league starts to grow or stops to grow at a significant margin, or if there's another pandemic that could cause the league to have another explosion. Not explosion, but another bubble burst, right? Either way, the cap's not a problem. And if the reason for doing this is cap motivated, then I don't see what the reason for doing this is. You're only going to save $5 million in cap space. The Browns are not bringing in any free agents that are super expensive at this point anyways. Even Ndamukong Suh would not be super expensive. And I do believe you do have the cap space to bring in Ndamukong Suh if that's what you really wanted to do. The roster is mostly complete. I don't see the reason for trading a former NFL rushing champion in Kareem Hunt for what would be a diminished return just to save $5 million in cap space. That doesn't make any sense to me. How does that make the team better for this year or next year? I don't see how that does. I think just keeping Kareem Hunt on your team makes your team better than making any trade for Kareem Hunt. Because let's remember, I know we try to throw out these running back trades all the time, and we act like a running back can get a second-round pick or first-round pick, but the running back's value as far as the trade goes is very limited because people don't value that position. And then when you look at Kareem Hunt, right? I know we all know what Kareem Hunt is capable of because we watch him every day. But if you're an NFL GM who is not following the Browns every day, or not a big Kareem Hunt fan, or has something invested in the success of Kareem Hunt like the Cleveland Browns do, you look at his stats and you go, he hasn't had over 1,000 yards since 2018. Well, 2017, his rookie year. The most he's had since then was 841. And last year, he had 386 yards and missed 8 games. Doesn't sound like anybody you would trade for, especially at the running back position, right? The only running back on this team that has legit trade value is Nick Chubb. Everybody else, you might be able to get a 5th-round pick. And I know it's hard to hear because Kareem Hunt's worth more than a 5th-round pick to a lot of people, but that's just the reality of it. That's how the NFL works. If you're a running back, your value is not that high because people feel like they can get another one off the street. And they have, right? Look at the Ravens. They were like 3rd in the league in rushing, and they had dudes off the street just running for them. Like, people just feel like that's a very replaceable position, and they won't see the value in trading for Kareem Hunt. So I just don't see why you would do that. That's that part of it, right? If this was about cap savings. Now, if this was about team structure, I think it makes even less sense, this conversation out there about trading Kareem Hunt, because people are looking at this from a football sense. If people are looking at this from a football sense as Kareem Hunt is the odd man out, I really don't see how somebody gets to that conclusion. Because if you look at this roster, if you look what the Browns have done in the offseason, Demetric Felton's clearly the odd man out. Here's why I say that. And look, I hope Demetric has a long NFL career, but this is just the reality of what the Browns did. So Nick Chubb obviously not going anywhere. If you look at Kareem Hunt is a better runner than Demetric Felton. So is D'Ernest Johnson, better running back, like just straight up running the ball than Demetric Felton. Kareem Hunt is a better receiver than Demetric Felton, more proven, more experience, knows how to do more. Demetric might have a higher potential, but Kareem Hunt's better right now. Also, Jakeem Grant factors into this, right? Because Jakeem Grant, what was he brought in to do? Run some routes occasionally, like Demetric Felton would do, and kick and return punts. Well, not kick and return punts. Return kicks and punts. So that's a heavy part of Demetric Felton's job. If you go back into last year where I was saying, hey, here's how the Browns could justify keeping Demetric Felton in training camp, it was because Demetric had insane value at that point because he was going to be asked to kick and return kicks and punts. He was going to be asked to play special teams as a defender. He was going to be asked to run routes, and he was going to be asked to be the 4th running back. He was filling 4 spots. Well, you took kick return, punt return. He might play some defense on special teams, but you can just keep another linebacker and have that job filled from a player who's more fit to do that. Then, you look at what else does he bring? He runs routes. Jakeem Grant's probably a better route runner, definitely a better route runner than Demetric Felton. And he could take the end arounds that Demetric Felton was going to do. He's faster, better athlete. Like, he's just more fit to do all the Demetric Felton stuff that Demetric Felton wasn't doing last year. So when you have that down, the only thing he has now is 4th-string running back, and Jerome Ford might take that from him. So that's why he's the odd man out, in my opinion. And Demetric Felton's the one guy on this roster right now. Now that you can keep guys who have had regular game experience on the practice squad, that makes sense to be on the practice squad. Jerome Ford's not going to slide by on the practice squad. He's a 4th-round pick. He was highly coveted by a lot of teams. He's a former Alabama prospect. If you put him on if you cut him, somebody's going to pick him up. Same thing obviously goes with D'Ernest Johnson. Kareem Hunt, I don't even have to say that. But not D'Ernest, but Demetric Felton, he might be able to be cut. You can keep him on the practice squad. I think that makes the most sense. I don't know why people are suddenly juxtaposing Kareem Hunt and D'Ernest Johnson when D'Ernest Johnson has lived with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb as the 3rd man for the last 3 years. They have obviously coexisted on this roster before. The Browns kept 4 running backs last year because of the versatility that Demetric could bring. But now they don't need that versatility anymore because of Jakeem Grant. So Demetric really doesn't have a spot on this team right now. He has to fight for a spot. And that spot is with Jakeem Grant, who just signed a deal. So that's going to be an uphill battle for him. So I just think that's probably the odd man out if you're the Cleveland Browns. Kareem Hunt spot, I think it's pretty safe. It wouldn't make sense to trade him. I just don't think it makes a ton of sense. And even if they do trade him, I don't think that makes sense. Unless they get like a first round or second round pick for him, then okay, whatever. But as of right now, I just don't think it makes sense. And I think people are overthinking this. I don't know why we went straight to juxtaposing Kareem Hunt and Dearness Johnson the second Dearness signed that deal. It really don't make that much sense to me. But that's just my 2 cents on that whole situation. Now, there was another thing that I want to talk about, and that was somebody came up with a trade projection. Okay, so this comes from brownswire.com and is written by Jared Mueller. Shout out to him for this article. And it is it's titled A Creative Trade Suggestion for that could solve multiple concerns for the Browns. And Ben Volin's actually the guy who put this out here, who said, putting my GM hat on for a minute, but Baker for Garoppolo straight up, who says, no, Browns get 1 year of Watson insurance. Niners get a veteran backup for Lance. Each team gets rid of a contract it does not want. Okay, now if you're just, and I bet Ben wasn't really like thinking this through, so I'm not really criticizing Ben, right? But he was just throwing it out there. And on the surface, it's something that does make sense. There is some value in it. Here's why I don't think it makes sense once you look deeper into the situation, because let's pull up Jimmy Garoppolo's contract. Jimmy Garoppolo's contract is not fully guaranteed this year. He only has $1.4 million in dead cap. That is why the Niners are comfortable sitting on this, because they have the proper leverage to just sit on this until they don't want to anymore. Because if they cut Jimmy Garoppolo, what that dead cap number means is that they're not going to have a whole $18 million cap hit like the Browns will have with Baker Mayfield. They will just have $1.4 million. Now, you can make the argument that if they really wanted some insurance behind Trey Lance and they didn't want an old guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, they wanted somebody younger, and maybe they wanted to save $6 million off the cap, right? They want a backup, right? This is the idea. They want a backup. They need a backup, and they know that that backup's going to make the team. So instead of keeping Jimmy Garoppolo on, because if he does make the team, is owed that $24 million. Instead of doing that, we will sign Baker Mayfield, we'll trade for Baker Mayfield and save $6 million by doing it, knowing that Jimmy Garoppolo or Baker Mayfield would make the team. That would have to be the Niners' mindset going into this. I don't necessarily know if that is their mindset, but that's the only way it can make sense from the Niners' perspective. From the Browns' perspective, if the Niners offered Jimmy Garoppolo for Baker Mayfield, I think the Browns would do it in a heartbeat. Here's why I think the Browns would do it in a heartbeat. Not because Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be this insane upgrade. I don't even know if they would actually keep Jimmy Garoppolo, because that is the one way that you can get rid of Baker's $18 million and walk out with only a $1.4 million cap hit. Because what you would do is you would trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, but you wouldn't be trading for Jimmy Garoppolo's services as a player. You would be trading for that contract, because it would be an NBA trade at that point, right? You would trade Baker Mayfield for Jimmy Garoppolo, and what you would get in return is maybe $16.5 million in cap relief, because you would cut Jimmy Garoppolo the second you could, let him go to free agency, and then you would take the cap savings, and then you would dump all that money off on the San Francisco 49ers. Now, this is why that's what would need to happen for that trade to happen, right? Is the Niners would have to be dead set on wanting, like they would have to be so unsure about Trey Lance that they felt like they needed somebody to come in if that man stunk up the joint, right? Like they have to have, I wouldn't say no faith, but not a great amount of faith in Trey Lance. I don't know what that situation is in the Bay with him. I feel like they have a pretty decent amount of trust in him. And if they have a decent amount of trust in him, they're not going to go ahead and do this. But let's say they have like almost no faith that Trey Lance is going to go out there and be anything good. And let's say he is like having a terrible OTAs, terrible mandatory camps. He just looks awful. Like doesn't look like an NFL quarterback. Then you make this trade. But that hinges on the fact that you would think that Baker Mayfield would be a good enough. Like that also hinges on your opinion on Baker Mayfield. I don't know what their opinion is on Baker Mayfield, but Baker's not one of those players that have been good enough long enough to have an assumed opinion of from any other NFL team. Some teams might feel like that's suitable. Some teams might feel like you're trading for Drew Lock. right? Like that's just the difference between how teams feel about him. Some teams feel like he could be okay when it comes to Baker Mayfield. Some teams feel like Baker Mayfield's awful. So we don't know what they feel like on that. That's why I just don't think this makes sense. If I'm the 49ers, if I'm not sure about Trey Lance, I just keep Jimmy Garoppolo. If Trey Lance plays well during the season, I cut Jimmy Garoppolo in the middle of the year. I saved that. Well, I'd let Jimmy walk at the end of the year, and I'm fine, right? Or if Trey looks like he's ready after OTAs, and maybe in training camp, you just cut Jimmy Garoppolo, pocket the money, and move on, right? It doesn't make sense unless Trey Lance is awful in training camp. That's the only way this trade makes sense. And also, it would hinge on them liking Baker Mayfield enough to make that move, which that's not a guaranteed assumption to make. So I just don't think this is very likely. It's a creative idea, but it's just one of those ideas that when you look deeper into the weeds, it doesn't make very much sense. Because I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo would be available, to be honest, if they really had that little faith in Trey Lance. And given that they've had him on the team for a year and they're going ahead and moving on to the Trey Lance era, tells me that they're not going to be in a position where they feel like they need to spend $18 million on a backup quarterback. Now, the Browns could get in a situation where maybe they say, hey, we eat 6, you only take 12, and then we get the cap relief. So it would end up being maybe $8 million once you add 6 plus the $7.4 million you would save. Well, you would eat, and then you would save the rest from Baker's contract. So maybe you save $11 million in cap space. Maybe. But again, saving cap space at this point of the offseason is one of those things that has diminishing returns at this point, right? Earlier, like in February, huge returns on saving cap space on Baker Mayfield. At this point, it's diminished returns. It doesn't really matter that much, given that Baker's going to be done at the end of this year anyways with that contract. So we'll see how things shake out. Again, there's just not a lot of great trade scenarios out there for Baker Mayfield. And this is why he's still on the team. Same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo. It's a creative idea. I just think it doesn't make very much sense once you get past the surface of the trade and you look at this deeper. I don't see it happening. But that's just my thoughts on some things that people have been talking about on the internet, in the Browns community, I guess, about the Browns. My 2 cents on them. Let me know your 2 cents in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.